Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Miguel Angel Moreno, and I am an Embarcadero MVP. Today, I will show you my presentation titled Use dBase Data Tables in Your Programs with No BDE. Introduction. The BDE is deprecated and no longer supported. The BDE is difficult and very cumbersome to install. However, you have a requirement to use dBase data tables. A new project has to use dBase data as is, maybe because you have another program or system that is already creating this data in dBase tables and you cannot change that. Or you want to migrate a legacy program to a new Delphi version, but you don't want to migrate the data. Or just because you simply want to use dBase data. What can we do? Microsoft has always had what they call ODBC desktop database drivers. These were a separate install in the era of Windows 95 and 98, but since we have Windows 2000 and Windows XP, these come bundled with any Windows version, including Windows 10. Windows 10 still has them, even there's an update in the internal versions. And these drivers support all dBase popular versions, 3, 4, and 5. These are the DSN parameters that you must configure to create a ODBC dBase driver connection. You go to the ODBC 32-bit administrator and create a data source name, a DSN. And these are the main options that you can set for a DSN connection. But also you can create a ODBC connection on the fly. And this is the way FireThatTable works. So these are the bare minimum parameters you need to set in order to connect to a dBase table. You can see at the very bottom a quick sample. You just need to define the driver, which is the Microsoft dBase driver, the default data directory. You can omit this one. As the note says, it will use current directory. And the third parameter that is required is the driver ID. In the previous page, you could see the driver ID belonging to each one of the dBase versions you want to connect to. Okay, let me show you this sample application that I created to show you how to use the dBase tables using the Microsoft ODBC dBase driver. First of all, we need to drop FireThatTable connection component. We go to the component, we select the driver ID to be ODBC. Once you've done that, we go to the ODBC driver, and from the drop-down menu, we select the one that says Microsoft dBase driver. There's other drivers that look like it. Some of them are aliases, others are just placeholders. They don't actually have a driver. Make sure that you are selecting this specific one, Microsoft dBase driver. Once you have selected the driver, we need to add the parameters for the connection. Driver ID will point to the specific dBase version of tables we are opening. As we go back to the reference from Microsoft for this driver, you can see that we have these three options. 21 will be for dBase 3 tables, 277 will be for dBase 4, and 583 for dBase 5 tables. Now, the driver is smart. If you are using dBase 4 and 5 tables, it will automatically open a component master production index, those with extension MDX, and those will be automatically updated every time you do an insert, append, deletion, or update of your records. Exactly the way it would be if you were using the BDE. So we go back here and we type 277, which stands for dBase 4 tables. The deleted parameter, when set to 1, it means do not show deleted records, which would be the standard way to use it, not to show records that have been deleted. If for some reason you need to have them shown on your application, then you can toggle this setting to 0. Default directory will be the path where it will automatically look for tables that don't have a path attached to it. So you can rely on this parameter if all your dBase tables are sitting in just one single directory. So you don't need to specify full path names for every data table in your components and in your application. But if you happen to have an application that uses dBase tables scattered through different directories, you can use this just as a fallback measure. Put one of those directories here, but you will have to specifically tell in the component the full path name of each one of your dBase tables to override this directory. And last but not least, you have the collating sequence. Here I'm using one of the default ones, ASCII, but you can type any one that is supported on dBase. We click test, and the connection is successful, so the driver is working. Now I have two FireThat components here to show you the two ways you can use these ones close to the BDE, but not using BDE. The first option is by using a FireThatTable. If you use a FireThatTable, you have the option to select the catalog name as the base directory where your data table is sitting at. This will override the default directory in the FireThat connection. And once you do that, you can select the table from this drop-down menu. The FireThatTable component will parse the directory that you specified in the catalog name property, so you can select the specific table name. This will help you for design purposes. The only one problem with this is that when you have multiple nested directories, like in this sample, we have 3 levels of directories, the parsing code of the FireThat component will not work. So when you try to open in design mode the component, it will yield this error because it couldn't parse the catalog name completely. I have a workaround for that. Bottom line is, my recommendation is use just the table name and rely on your default directory if you're using one global default directory, or better yet, don't use the catalog name and put a full table name here, the full path plus the table name, along with a fixed code that I have for fixing the bug in FireThat. So let's try that. I have this code for opening the table. I added an edit box so you can select the actual dBase table name, parsing through your directory, your disk drive. Once you have selected that file name and you click on Open Table, the code will fill the table name property of the FireThat table with the full path name of the dBase table, only removing the extension. You don't need to define the .dbf. So the only thing we're doing here is removing the extension and feeding the full path to the table name property. Now, if you're gonna do edits and updates and deletions, it is recommended that you also set the update table parameter under update options of the table to point to the exact name to avoid bad guessing of the automatic SQL update command created by FireThat. So once we do this, we're also adding a unit created by me called FireThat plus utils that fixes the bug on parsing multi-nested directories. So now let's try this. We run the application now. First, we select the dBase file table name. Once we have selected it, you can see the full path in the input box, and we click the Open Table button that will fill the properties as shown in the code. And with the aid of that unit to patch the bug in FireThat, we can see that it opens up the table with no problem. And also to show you that the updates will work with no problem, I will add some custom letters here. I changed the description for this record. I saved the table. I will close the table and open it up again. And you can see that the changes that I added are still there. I will remove them and save the table again, close the table, and open it up again. You can see back to the original version. Okay, this is one way to use the dBase table by using the FireThatTable component. You can also, I added this convenient button. You can see the connection definition of how the connection is being set now, the driver ID plus the specific ODBC driver and the parameters for the ODBC, and also the table definition, how the properties were filled up in code for the catalog name and the table name. The real key here is to use the table name with the full path name with no extension of the table. I also have another way to show you how to use the dBase tables with a query. I placed a FireBack Query component here. I put this simple query, which is selecting from one single table, and I'm combining it with the powerful features of FireBack of defining macros and parameters. So the dBase table is actually a macro, so I can define the table name in a macro. And the field name that I will query against is also defined with a macro. And the value that I need to filter it against is defined with a parameter. So right now, this won't work because the parameter is empty, is parsed, but has no value. And the macros, they've been parsed, but have no value as well. So with the Open Query button, what I will do once we define the table name in the input box is that in code, we will fill the macro of the table name as the full qualified table name with no extension, the field name to be the one input in the input box by the user, and the value to be checked against also as the one input by the user. So let's try this now. I select the same table again on the same directory. So you can see the full table name there. The field name, we have one field name called descriptio. And since I'm using the like operator, I will use a value with wildcards in SQL for selecting any record whose description field name has a value with a K embedded in the description. We open the query, and these are all the records that matched the constraint. This is all dynamically handled, and you can see the combination of the powerful features of FireBack by using a dBase table with a Microsoft ODBC driver. Again, you can see the query definition here. This will show you the actual SQL that is in the component and the macros and parameters that were filled in code. I also have another version of the queries. In the BDE, you could have a complex query of multiple tables from different directories in different sources. The way to define those in the BDE was by having a query like this one, but each table name to be fully qualified but enclosed in single quotes. By doing this in the BDE, you could have this query running. The Microsoft driver supports this kind of multi-tables in different directories, only that you don't need to quote it. They need to be specified without quotes. Then I can select this query as is. I will paste it in my query component. So instead of this single query, I will place the complex one. If I try to test it, the bug will kick in again because I'm using multiple directories here. But when running this code, okay, this is the sample that I showed you, how to you quickly and with no hassle use the Microsoft dBase driver to replace your BDE and use dBase tables in your applications. These are the references. First, this is the main page for Microsoft ODBC desktop database drivers. Actually, the page is slightly confusing, but there's one thing I can tell you is all drivers included since Windows XP and above, all of them work flawlessly with no problem with the dBase drivers. I'm telling you because in this documentation, which is sometimes referring to older versions of the drivers, is saying mistakenly that the BDE must be installed. But that applied for older versions.